Welcome back. This video is a compilation of previously uploaded episodes, which you can find individually on the channel. But if you're new to the channel or would like to watch them again, then here you go. The first post I wanted to look at was pretty disturbing. It was uploaded onto the RBI sub by the Reddit user Too Spooky For Me on August 7th of 2023, and it sounds like some sort of phenomenon is happening where the OP is from. People are using some sort of hypnotic suggestion to rob people in the streets of my city. How exactly are they pulling this off? I am from India, and I have come across multiple instances of people getting robbed in mysterious ways, where they don't even remember being robbed until a while later. Case number 1. One of my high school teachers was on her way home after school. The nearest train station/subway was about 15 minutes away. While on the way, she came across a man who asked her the time and wanted some directions. She told him the time and started helping him out. There was a back and forth conversation for a minute or two. Then he asked how much money she had in her purse, and for some odd reason, she just complied and told him. Then he asked her to give him the money, and also the jewelry she was wearing. She took out the jewelry and money from the bag and gave it to him. He asked her for directions one last time and she gave it to him again. Then he just left. It wasn't until she entered the train station, got onto the train and sat down that she realized what happened. Then she got off, called her husband and the police. They weren't able to track the man down. Case number 2. A friend's mom was organizing a festive ceremony at a local temple. It was daytime and she was helping out with the preparations. A man with a long white beard, a beautiful face, and a glimmer in his eyes walked up and started talking to her when she was alone. She asked for her name and started telling her how she was doing a pious deed by organizing the ceremony and that she'll receive all kinds of blessings from God. Then he asked her to open up her purse and give her all the money she was carrying. Unfortunately, she was carrying a buttload of cash that morning and literally pulled a big wad of cash and gave it to him. A coworker of the lady was witnessing the entire event happening from a distance, but didn't pay much thought to it, as it looked like she knew the man and owed him some money, and nothing unusual was going on. He took the money out and touched her head, then walked away. The lady went on to help out with prep again. Only after a while did the coworker walk up to her and ask her about the man and the reason she gave him all that money. "What money?" she said. She checked her purse, found it empty, and had a massive panic attack. People gathered up, but they weren't able to track the man who took the money. My first thoughts when I read this reminded me of one of the most terrifying substances on the planet, scopolamine. For those of you that are unaware, scopolamine is a drug that when consumed makes the user extremely susceptible to anybody's suggestions. For short, if you're under the influence of this drug, you'll probably do anything anybody tells you to do, trapped under a hypnotic spell. And to make it even worse, nobody can tell because on the outside you're acting normally, and many of the victims often wake up the next morning with no memory of what happened. It's often used in South America and other parts of the world, and maybe now it's made its way to India.
It was really serendipity. I was interested in looking at how scopolamine affected memory and attention in people suffering from mood disorders. People complain about attention problems and memory problems all the time. And scopolamine affects a system called the cholinergic system, which is centrally involved in memory and attention functions. And it was shown, a couple decades ago now, that the cholinergic system is overactive in people suffering from mood disorders. So it's kind of a very simple concept that, well, maybe if we block those overactive receptors, that it'll improve memory and attention. And not only did people get better, they basically got better overnight, or at least within a couple of days.
The OP would also provide a link to an Indian news article with a third instance of these robberies. The article read like this. In a recent incident of hypnosis and robbery, a gang of thieves robbed a jewelry shop on Diwali afternoon by hypnotizing the owner of the shop. The entire incident was also captured on CCTV installed inside the shop. The footage shows as one man enters the shop of Satish Verma and asks him for gold jewelries. Later, his companion enters the shop and joins him. When Satish produced some jewelries before them, the two men cleverly hypnotized them and started giving him directions. After a few minutes, the duo ordered him to pack all the ornaments and give him 1,000 rupees. They asked Satish to put all the packages in his drawer, and afterwards they opened a drawer in front of Satish and left with all the jewelry. The incident took place on October 23rd at around 1:50 p.m. When Satish realized the foul play, it was too late. According to Hamish Verma, the son of Satish, the duo not only left with all the jewelry, but they had also stolen 35,000 rupees out of the drawer. A report has been filed with the local police.
नमस्कार, मैं हूं शम्स ताहिर खान। दुनिया में लूट की अब तक न जाने कितनी कहानियां आपने सुनी होंगी और न जाने कितनी तस्वीरें देखी होंगी। नहीं देखा होगा कि खुद लूटने वाला यूं लुटेरे की मदद कर रहा हो। अब जरा तस्वीर को पलट देते हैं। शुरुआत दूसरी तस्वीर से। इस वक्त आप जो अपने टीवी स्क्रीन पर देख रहे हैं वो कुछ और नहीं बल्कि लूट की लाइव तस्वीरें ही में दिखा रहे। वक्त पर भी नजर डाल लीजिए। लुटने के बाद होश में आने का ये वक्त मुश्किल से 2-4 मिनट का खेल रहा होगा। जौहरी जब पूरी तरह अपने होशो हवास में लौटा तो सबसे पहले गल्ले को चेक कर रहा है और फिर गल्ले के अंदर से कैश और जेवर गायब देख उसकी हालत कुछ ऐसी हो जाती है। लुटने का एहसास ऐसा कि कभी खुद ही सिर के
When I took a look into the comment section of this post, I was surprised to see that nobody was mentioning scopolamine. In fact, many people were leaning towards the likelihood that these thieves were either Scientologists or magicians. I was once approached by a Scientologist in Hollywood who was doing an outreach or recruitment, and as she spoke to me, she'd snap her fingers every sentence or so. I was creeped out and felt like she was trying to do some sort of hypnosis or mentalist trick. I walked away, but she was hard to brush off. Would have been interesting if you would have clapped your hands after she snapped her fingers. Then when she tried to talk to you again, go, no, wait after every pause. It would destroy her timing and she'd probably get pissed and leave. I've noticed often with people who talk continuously or don't pause between sentences, it can be really hard for me to break away from them because I need those little pauses to have time to think of a response or excuse to leave. I wonder if the finger snapping was meant like that, to cause distraction/confusion at the points where you'd normally be thinking about how you were going to get away, or processing that what's going on is odd. I realize not everyone's mind works like mine though. Some people don't seem to easily get overwhelmed by situations like that. Us magicians/MPL students call this a pattern interrupt. Touching people unexpectedly works too, like a sudden touch to the shoulder. Most impressive psychological feat? Give someone something. Take their hand and put your water bottle directly in their hand, then ask for their phone for a second. And 80% of the time, they'll just hand it to you. Then, say thanks so much and walk away briskly but not running. They'll usually stand there stunned for 15 to 20 seconds before it all comes to them. Pattern and talking are obviously very important, but the feeling of reciprocity is strong in the human psyche. You give me something, I'll give you something in return if you ask me nicely for it, especially while I'm holding your item. We're funny creatures. Edit, seeing Darren Brown mentioned below. He does this exact same thing on YouTube. After watching a few of Darren's videos on YouTube, I was amazed at how easy it is to convince somebody to give you their things, which could explain these recent robberies happening in India. The OP would close off their post with a somewhat disturbing thought. There have been other cases in the news as well from time to time. How exactly are people pulling this off? Is there a secret school of thievery where people learn this skill? One thing is certain. Whether it's drugs or powerful mental manipulation, groups of criminals are catching on to this method. And if this continues, crimes like this may start popping up more often, maybe even on a bigger scale. This next post comes from the Reddit user Night Elf Baby, and despite being short, details a terrifying experience. Came home to find purple prints all over my walls that won't remove. Spent the night over at my friend's house and I came back the next day. I first noticed that there was a huge purple stain on the side of the bed that I normally sleep on. Was confused, but kinda just figured I spilled makeup somehow, since I normally spill makeup on my sheets. Didn't really click that the area was too big to be a makeup stain. I checked my clothes, but nothing. Fell asleep, and the next day when I was getting ready, I looked into the mirror and I noticed a very clear purple handprint on my wall. Again, I first thought makeup. I went to get soap and water and tried to clean it off, but it wouldn't budge. I checked my hands, but nothing purple. I ended up lining up my hand and it was bigger than mine. The palm is way too big, and I have pretty long fingers, so again, I thought it was mine until I compared them.
Doing this to prove that this is not my palm. This is the top of the palm. This area right here is at the bottom. Lining it up, it's about an inch bigger than my actual hand.
After lining it up, it seems to be a man's handprint. I started to look around more, and there's more finger marks smeared on my walls, around the outlets, in the bathroom, on the sink, toilet, and again on the walls. I ended up making a police report, but they couldn't do much because they don't have stuff to take fingerprints and nothing was stolen that I know of. Not entirely sure what the purple prints are, but I am going to be setting up security cameras and an extra lock on the garage door since it was unlocked and I'm guessing that's how they got in. I did see many comments claiming that this story was fake, but the OP was sure to provide plenty of photo evidence as well as a picture of what seems to be the police investigating their home like they said in their post. This sort of looks like somebody broke into the OP's home and didn't know that they had the purplish substance on their hands, maybe due to being intoxicated. What does make it weird is that nothing was stolen. This could indicate that the person that was breaking in didn't find what they were looking for, or even worse, who they were looking for. That's creepy. I would check all around for hidden cameras or stuff like that, and then definitely get some of your own hidden cameras put up, and don't tell anybody. It may have been someone you know, based on them knowing you weren't home. Stay safe. That's what the police think too, that it might be someone I know, since they knew to get in from the garage. I'll be updating if anything new happens, but we're setting up a lot of things to make it safer. It's so creepy that they touched the walls that much, almost like they were sneaking around in the dark. There would, however, be some more lighthearted theories in the comments as well. Do you by any chance have any brand new pair of jeans, pants, skirt, or dresses with indigo dye? I've had dark pants do this if I've only washed them once or twice. It can also transfer to your hands if it's dark enough or if you're sweating. Purple shampoo for blondes, dye transfer from new pants that someone wore without washing them after purchase, and then sat on your bed and touched the walls. Those prints look less like a giant's hands and more like someone casually touching the walls when they round the corner. However, the OP would somewhat debunk these theories when asked if they had anything purple that could have deposited the ink. I do not. I'm pretty sure I don't own anything purple, and checked my hands and body for any purple marks and nothing. I also compared my hand to the handprint, and the palm is significantly bigger. There was one last theory that I somewhat considered possible, despite being a bit out there. It came from the user Herbed Enthusiasm. Wild theory here, but hear me out. A bank robber needed a place to count the cash they got away with, and decided to pop into your unoccupied home. What they didn't know is that the teller that they robbed was smart, and stuck a dye pack in between the bills. The bank robber didn't see it until it was too late, and the purple dye went all over your bed, as well as their face, leaving them temporarily blind and with a terrible taste in their mouth. In their struggle to stumble blindly into your bathroom to wash off the dye, they bumped into your walls and toilet, leaving a trail of incriminating purple marks in their wake. Once they had rinsed out their eyes and mouths the best they could, they plugged their dying phone into one of your outlets so they could Google, "Are dye packs from the bank non-toxic?" I mean, the evidence is all there. The only explanation. To which the OP would reply with, "Honestly, theft ink makes sense. It was all over their hands and body because the bed was stained just where they would be laying down. It seemed like they just slept the night and left." Finally, after a night of letting the whole situation settle in, the OP would reply in the comments with a small update, and it appears as if they finally got to comb through all their belongings and discovered that the burglar did in fact steal one thing. Small update. He did steal something. My electric toothbrush. I'll be getting rid of my other toothbrush, and anything that would be put in my mouth like mouthwash, unsealed food, drinks. Guessing it was either the dude needed a toothbrush or for perverted reasons. The fact that the person who broke into the OP's home only stole the OP's toothbrush could indicate that this person knows who the OP is. It might even be obsessively stalking them. Despite this, no real answer has been provided, so we're just left to speculate on who could have left those handprints in the OP's home. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you've been a long-time subscriber of the channel, then you should already be familiar with some of the cults we've come across, and it seems as though we have another one beginning to pop up. But this time, their main form of reaching out is on a platform that millions of people frequent every minute of every day, TikTok. I came across this story when browsing through the RBI sub. A user by the name of Forsaken Dimension posted this on August 8th of 2023. TikToker being lured into a cult? So there's an influencer named Ruby Lana, who is very devoted to Christianity, and she recently posted a video stating that she is going to permanently be deleting all of her social media in 7 days for Jesus. How social media was her only source of income, and that she doesn't have any money right now. She shows her account where she only has 97 cents. Apparently, a married couple claiming to be prophets reached out to her online and told her about their group and to make this decision. There's an hour-long video that is still up on her YouTube channel explaining everything, which she claims is going to be deleted within 7 days. Not only is she deleting her social media, but she cuts off most of her social relationships such as family. She has no money, gave away her pets, and has moved to a new area after these people contacted her. A lot of people in the comments are concerned about this and are saying that she is being manipulated by a cult/false prophets. I've also seen some comments stating the possibility of sex trafficking and religious psychosis. Some people claim that this group only targets young girls of a specific race. This whole thing seems very sketchy to me, and a lot of people on TikTok are assuming that she's in a cult right off the bat. They keep making videos saying things like, she's in a cult, we have to save her. What are your thoughts? Unfortunately, at the time of me reading this post, the video that the OP linked back to was already deleted. Fortunately though, we have the Wayback Machine. I was pleased to discover that somebody had already archived Ruby's video, and despite it being laggy at times, I was able to save a portion of it to use for this.
Hi everyone, God bless you all. I know this is unexpected, but I am coming on here to confess some things publicly that God wants me to confess. But before I get into all of that, I'm also announcing that after this video goes up, 7 days after this video goes up, I'm going to be permanently deleting all my social medias. I was scrolling on TikTok. I was scrolling through my comments. I seen a username that said Apostle Adelia, and it was like a video that didn't have that many comments. So it was like when I barely clicked to see, it was like one of the first comments that popped up. She said that she had sent me a message on Instagram, and at this time I deactivated my Instagram. So then she messaged me through TikTok DMs. Apostle Adelia is married to Apostle Berthold, who you're gonna know more about them as I continue to speak. But she took the time and was obedient to God and hopped on a Zoom call at 12 at midnight. So this just really shows how the Lord really wanted me to hear this word in that moment.
After I watched the video, it was pretty clear that Ruby believed that these people really had her best interest in mind. The trust she displayed and willingness to listen to these people genuinely scared me. Now these people could have truthfully believed that they were working for God, but after I conducted my investigation, I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. In her video, Ruby describes how she was contacted by this Apostle Adelia, so I decided to check her out first, and Googling her name pulled up this TikTok account. At first glance, it looks like the average TikToker's account, who's had some videos do well but has not quite developed a true following, and from what Ruby has told us, it's reasonable to believe that this is the Apostle Adelia. Looking at her videos further validates this. Now, something I found interesting was that her most popular videos do not actually have high interactions. In fact, I was able to find 2 specific posts where we can clearly see that the like and comment ratio does not line up with the amount of views these videos have. Usually when you see numbers like this, it means that the poster has paid for some form of promotion, and TikTok makes it very easy for you to just pay and have a couple thousand views roll in. You can even see here where a video with 100,000 less views than the first one has more likes than the one that has over 100,000. This could be an attempt to seem more legitimate on their end. Or maybe they're just trying to get traction to start their religion. Who knows? A Redditor by the name of Randall Rising would comment this. I assume her viewers were the ones being conned. Why announce you're leaving? Why 7 days? Why not just go immediately? People are so gullible these days. To be fair, I'm the extreme opposite. Every time anyone opens their mouth, I assume they're lying. To which the OP would reply with, no idea, lol. This whole thing is super sketchy. Don't worry, we're not done looking into these people. On the website that Ruby talks about, freehimnow.org, we get to meet the second main figurehead of this alleged TikTok cult, Apostle Berthold. According to the Free Him Now website, Apostle Berthold was born and raised in Yaoundé, Cameroon. French is his first language, and he learned English after traveling abroad in the United States of America. He made the USA his home for several years to pursue higher education. He is proficient in computer science and mathematics. Apostle Berthold has been a leader in the ministry for 3 years. He loves to study the Word of God and enjoys learning the Lord's principles and ways. The Lord has gracefully gifted Apostle Berthold to teach and prophecy. One of Apostle Berthold's major passions is to restore the sound and balanced biblical doctrine back to the body of Christ. There will be a link in the description if you'd like to read through the rest yourself. If you scroll down, you're greeted with the advertisement for Apostle Berthold's boot camp. I've heard of church camp and even church retreats, but I've never heard of a boot camp. This could also just be a different way of advertising for some form of video mentorship program. But even if that's the case, These mentorship programs oftentimes end up being pyramid schemes, so that would not make the situation much better. The reason I believe this is in fact a scam is because I went to Apostle Berthold's social media section on the website, where you can find all of his social media links. The first one I went to was YouTube. I won't play any of his videos to avoid copyright, but one thing that did strike me odd was this video where he rambles about how the Lord told him that Cash App was bad and that everyone should stop using it. I'm not saying Cash App is evil or good, but I found this funny because if we go back to the archived video Ruby uploaded, we can see a link to the Free Him Now PayPal account where you can donate to help Ruby. But why not donate to Ruby directly instead of donating to the Free Him Now PayPal? In this description, you can also see a list of his socials, so Cash App is bad but PayPal isn't. A user by the name of Energy Lantern would reply to one of the OP's comments. There are no more apostles today. The closest thing we have to an apostle is a missionary. The YouTuber is someone I have never watched or met, and I'm guessing she's Pentecostal or charismatic, and would be someone who would go to this kind of presentation. The reason you will always lose any attempt to get out is because Pentecostals will say they have an experience in the Spirit, and that all you have is an argument. That is why you will always lose trying to talk sense into most people who follow these groups. My stepsister is proof because she wanted to be healed, and didn't take her chemo treatments because chemo makes you sterile and she wanted to have children. The doctor predicted her cancer would come back in 10 years, and the cancer came back and took my stepsister's life. People are willing to die for what they believe in, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. Luckily, I did manage to find Ruby's TikTok, where she had recently posted for the first time since June on August 10th of 2023.
Let you guys know that I am in complete access to all my accounts. I cut ties with everything that was going on. I'm back home. As you guys can see, my stuff is hung up in the back after living out of my suitcase for 2 months. But God is still getting all the glory because he still had his hand over me through this all. And everything that the enemy meant for bad, God is going to use for good in Jesus' name. Thank you all for all your prayers. Thank you for everyone who's been messaging me and everything. At first I really couldn't believe it, but your prayers and everything is what opened my eyes. The Lord heard your prayers, so thank you, Lord. Thank you everyone who prayed for me. And there's a lot of deception going on in the body of Christ, and I'm definitely going to make a video about this as the Lord leads, and the Lord's going to get all the glory because he's protecting me the whole time, and all I could do is thank him at this point. And just thank you guys for everyone who's been praying for me. There is a lot of things that were going around that is not true, and I am going to clarify that as well. But I just want to come on camera to just let you guys know, like, hey, I'm me, but praise God, he still gets all the glory, okay?
In this video, she vaguely talks about how she's okay now and has regained access to her social media accounts, while stating that her faith in God has not disappeared, but that there are many people using God maliciously and taking advantage of vulnerable individuals. I did see some comments on Reddit of people saying that she's an adult capable of making her own decisions, as well as the possibility that she knew who these people were, and that this was all a publicity stunt. Though I believe that she fell victim to these predatory people, who use others' faith to coerce them into joining their cause. As a disclaimer, I will say that this is only my theory, based off of what I was able to find online, and I cannot truly tell if these people are actually malicious. Thankfully, Ruby was able to make it out okay, despite having to live out of her suitcase for 2 months. At the time of this recording, we have not gotten the full story from Ruby, and her channel has not uploaded a new video since she deleted it. Hopefully in time, and when she's comfortable, she'll let us know about what really happened, and we'll get to find out the truth about Apostle Berthold and Adelia. Laureen was born on the 3rd of April in 1966. Her parents divorced not long after her birth, and she was primarily raised by her mother, Judith. At around 4 years old, Laureen and her mom relocated for some time to Miami, but after 6 years of being in Florida, moved back to Manchester. Laureen was known to be a generally happy person by her close friends and family, but eventually she began partying, drinking alcohol, and smoking weed, which led to people around her labeling her as troubled. While reports indicated that Laureen occasionally mentioned the idea of running away, her mother's statements revealed that their home environment wasn't inherently toxic. There were some fights here and there, but nothing out of the regular family drama, and definitely not anything that would have made Laureen want to truly run away. At the time Laureen disappeared, she was 14 years old. It was the beginning of spring break in 1980, and Laureen's mother Judith was attending her boyfriend's professional tennis match. Instead, Laureen decided to stay home and spent the day drinking and hanging out with her friend and 2 older boys. reportedly aged 19 and 21 at the time. Allegedly, Laureen was spotted in a nearby convenience store restocking the wine cooler, presumably in exchange for the alcohol, although there is no solid proof of this ever happening. Later that evening, Laureen and one of the boys were in the living room when they began to hear noises in the hallway by her door. Assuming it was Laureen's mother and boyfriend returning from the tennis trip, the boys scurried out the back door, leaving Laureen and her friend, who was passed out in the other room at this time, alone in the apartment. This incident is speculated to have occurred at around 12:30 a.m. Less than an hour later, at around 1:15 a.m., Laureen's mother, Judith, would return home to the apartment on the 3rd floor. Upon arriving home, the first chilling detail Judith noticed was that all of the lights illuminating the hallways to the apartment floors were not only off, but unscrewed from their sockets. When Judith went to look for Laureen, she checked her room in the dimness, then spotted a figure lying in her bed, assuming it was her daughter. It was when Judith's boyfriend noticed the back door was open. Judith's concerns grew. She went back into Laureen's room to wake her up, only to discover that the person in bed was not Laureen. In the bed was Laureen's friend, who appeared confused and had no idea where Laureen had gone. The last thing she remembered was that Laureen said she was going to sleep on the couch. Judith sprang into action, immediately starting her search for her daughter. She walked up and down the streets calling Laureen's name, yet unfortunately, she was nowhere to be found. Eventually, Judith did contact the police to report that her daughter had gone missing at around 3 to 4 a.m.
Laureen Rahn was just a young teenager the last time anyone saw her. Now, 3 decades later, her case is getting another look. On April 26, 1980, 14-year-old Laureen Rahn was hanging out in her Merrimack Street neighborhood. She and a female friend went back to her apartment where they fell asleep. When Laureen's mother came home that night, the friend was asleep on the couch, but Laureen was gone.
The police immediately initiated interviews with everyone present in the house. When they asked about the possibility of Laureen running away, her mother stated that there was no reason for her to do so. Beyond usual disagreements, the relationship was solid, and no significant incidents had occurred that could prompt Laureen to run away. The investigators also questioned the young man who had been with Laureen. When asked about the events, he recalled hearing voices in the hallways, prompting him to leave with Laureen locking the door behind him. He was hounded about the chance of mishearing the sounds, but he denied it, confirming that Laureen had locked the door behind him when he hurried out the back. As a result of this interview, both of the young men were cleared of any suspicion and were not considered suspects. During the initial investigation, the police seemed to completely dismiss the idea that something more sinister could be the reason for Laureen's disappearance, almost immediately ruling her as a runaway child. But what is interesting is that when you start to look at the evidence, you realize something else may have happened. Police found that Laureen's brand new shoes and personal belongings were still at the house, which would indicate that Laureen didn't pack anything. This doesn't sound like someone running away. Also, you have to consider why Laureen would agree to have her friend sleep over the night she was deciding to run away. As the days went on, no sign of Laureen was ever found. But Judith did begin to receive a series of phone calls from unknown callers for quite some time after Laureen went missing. Nobody on the other end of the line ever spoke to Judith. They only called, and when she answered, there was nothing. Now, there are multiple theories as to what could have happened to Laureen, and we're going to begin by looking at as many of the possibilities that I found as I can. Let's start at the beginning. Some of the first people the police sought to interview were the boys that Laureen and her friend were hanging out with. Being much older than the 14-year-old girls, it was a bit suspicious that these men were hanging out with Laureen from the beginning. In some reports, it stated that they may have worked or have been friends with one of the employees at the convenience store that they got the alcohol, where Laureen was seen earlier that day. The two names of the individuals have never been released to the public, and they both were cleared of any suspicion from the beginning, but unfortunately, it seems as though these events may have haunted the boys later into adulthood. The last boy to see Laureen that night would reportedly take his own life. Maybe from the guilt of knowing that they could have potentially helped Laureen, or maybe from the guilt of being associated with the crime in some way. We'll never know what the reason was. And just to be 100% clear, I'm not stating explicitly that they had anything to do with the disappearance, but they certainly should have been considered more thoroughly by the police.
A missing juvenile at the time, and she just never appeared. And there's never been any real solid leads to where to go to actually identify where she is right now.
It's been 30 years since Laureen Rahn vanished. Her case is profiled on the website of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, along with an age-progressed picture. Today, Laureen would be 44.
After Laureen went missing, her mother Judith frequently received anonymous phone calls late at night, typically between 3 and 4 a.m. Over the time, the frequency of the calls increased. When Judith answered, she was often met with silence, sometimes interrupted by faint breathing. On one occasion, An ex-boyfriend of Laureen named Roger received the call. It was his mother who answered, and a girl on the other end claimed to be Lori, one of Roger's ex-girlfriends. However, aside from this account, there is no evidence to support the authenticity of this phone call. During Judith's investigation, she found 3 puzzling charges originating from a California hotel room a few months after Laureen's disappearance. With no family or friends in California, Judith was baffled. She hired 2 former FBI agents turned private investigators who traveled to the exact hotel from where the calls were made. 2 of the calls were directed to Laureen's home, but interesting enough, a 3rd call was placed to a privately operated teen sex help hotline. This led Judith to suspect that Laureen might have been the one making the calls. The hotline was operated by a doctor known as Dr. Z and her husband, who was also a medical professional. Their mission was to assist teens and young adults in the sex work industry and provide professional counsel to those in need. During the investigation, one detective decided to visit Boston to speak to Dr. Z and to further probe the hotel connections. The ensuing discoveries posed more questions than they answered. You see, initially, Dr. Z's husband claimed that a young woman from New Hampshire had made a call to them for guidance. However, he later retracted his statement, citing uncertainties about the young woman's identity. The investigation into the 3 hotel calls uncovered a chilling fact. Local police in the area confirmed that they were investigating the hotel for producing CBD, as they had reported that predators and producers had been operating in that hotel room during the time frame of the calls. However, a concrete connection was never established. Despite these leads, the search for Laureen led to another dead end. Yet these phone calls broadened the range of potential scenarios to her fate. Judith was adamant that she hadn't made the calls. In that era, it wasn't uncommon for people to make calls and bill them to another account with the phone operator's assistance. However, this process required providing personal details to link to a billed account, leading many to speculate that Laureen may have indeed been behind those calls. As for the anonymous calls that Judith was receiving, they persisted for years, ceasing only when she changed her phone number, probably hoping to escape the haunting late-night rings. The same year that Laureen went missing, other girls also disappeared in the area. Rachel Garden in March, the month before Laureen, Denise Denault in June of 1980, 2 months after Laureen, and Shirley McBride in July of 1984. Rachel was 15 years old when she disappeared on March 22nd of 1980. She was last seen purchasing gum at a local market on the way to sleep over at a friend's house. Sadly, the 15-year-old never made it there. A lot like Laureen, it was speculated that Rachel ran away, but her parents didn't think so. There were 2 witnesses who said they had seen Rachel talking to 3 men in a car near the corner store, and it appeared as if she knew them. When the police looked into the men, some of them had criminal records, and one of them had even served time in prison for SA. There is a story that claims that while at a bar, one of the men confessed to killing Rachel and even spoke about where they hid their remains. This sparked an investigation, but when the investigators searched the area, no remains or evidence were ever found to prove the confession. Unlike Laureen and Rachel, Denise was older. When she went missing, she was 25. She was the mother of 2 at the time, and despite efforts, no clues of where she went were ever found. There have been many more women that went missing in the area throughout the years, but these are just the ones from the same year. The reason I bring up all these girls is not only because they all went missing around the same time, but they all lived within close proximity to each other. And to make things even more suspicious, in the area and time that these girls all went missing, there was an active serial killer in the area, and his victims were almost always young girls. Terry Petter Rasmussen, also known as Bob Evans, but more famously known as the Chameleon Killer, was a serial killer responsible for a string of murders. He moved around a lot between California and Massachusetts, but around the time that Laureen went missing, he resided in the same area. What makes a lot of people believe that Terry could have had something to do with the disappearance of Laureen is his MO. Terry was known for dating single mothers and was even responsible for the Bear Brook murders, a case where in 1978, Terry was dating Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch. Terry, Honeychurch, and her 2 daughters were last seen after Honeychurch had an argument with her family, and by November of 1985, the bodies of Marlise and her daughter Mary were found in a barrel in Bear Brook State Park in New Hampshire. By this time, Terry had already resettled into New Hampshire, and in fact, one of Terry's kidnapping victims, Denise Bowden, lived on the same street that Denise Denault lived on as well. Terry would always get close to these single mothers and eventually end up killing their daughters. And while Laureen's mother was not exactly single, she was divorced, and this could loosely fit within Terry's pattern of killings. If we look at the area that Terry lived and reportedly worked at, we can clearly see why some people would think that he had something to do with the disappearances as well. and many times serial killers do have victims that they do not reveal despite police efforts. Terry died in prison on December 28, 2010. He was 67, and at the time was imprisoned for the separate murder of In Soon Jun. Because of this, we will never know if Terry had something to do with Laureen's disappearance, at least until investigators close and hopefully solve this case. But despite this, no discernible connection has ever been made that links Laureen to Terry. This is just another layer that adds more to the mystery of what could have happened to Laureen.
Now, I haven't talked any more about Ensoon's problems or my problems because, frankly, you're not my priest, and you're not my doctor, and both stories have their place. You know, gossip has its place in society sometimes, but I'm just not going to say any more about Ensoon or myself right now.
Well,
because,
with the understanding
I mean,
that
frankly, no, I'm not going to cut you off. I'm not going to cut you off. And I've always tried to live by the model that there's no defense against the truth. But sometimes it's hard to find out what the truth is. You got one side, the other side, and something down the middle that people might perceive to be the truth. Now, when that Southern fire was roaring last month, I don't know if you've ever lived in a rural area before, but most people are signed up for the firefighting crew. And when you get a journeyman carpenter that's only making maybe $8 or $9 an hour up there, and I'm talking about a professional journeyman, somebody that knows what he's doing and works good. And I guess you could compare that to a carpenter in this area that's out of the union. I think the scale is about $38 an hour in the Bay Area.
Over the years, there have been 2 possible sightings of Laureen, as well as other theories of what happened. In 1981, Judith was informed that one of her relatives may have spotted Laureen in a bus station in Boston, Massachusetts, but for some reason, did not approach her to make sure. Unfortunately, this ended with no answers. Laureen was reportedly sighted again in 1988, but this was all the way in Anchorage, Alaska, where a sex worker was reported to look just like her. Investigators contacted the Alaskan police, but unfortunately could not find a sex worker, likely because they moved to another location. This sighting would coincide with the theories that Laureen was abducted into sex trafficking. Another possible link to this would be when the doctors running the sex help hotline were questioned and mentioned that Laureen may have been hanging out with an adult film star named Annie Sprinkle. But when investigators caught up to Annie, she said that she had never met Laureen. Detectives even went through every single one of Annie's films, just so they could make sure that nobody resembling Laureen was in them. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Laureen was never found in any of the films. Over the years, this story has garnered a lot of attention, and there is even a video that was uploaded to YouTube that people believe was associated with somebody who may know something about the case. I'll play a portion of it here. But from what I can tell and what I've learned about the internet, it's more likely that this is an ARG attempt, or somebody trying to ride the wave of attention surrounding Laureen's disappearance. At the time of recording, it's been around 43 years since Laureen went missing. She would be 57 now, and many family members of hers still believe that she could be out there somewhere. In my personal opinion, I believe that some foul play happened here. As for what exactly, I can't tell. There are too many things happening on or about the same time that Laureen went missing, and while it all could be a freak coincidence, I believe that the chances of that are unlikely. My attempts to get a FOIA were denied, and everybody I contacted either didn't reply or were unwilling to participate in the video. Seeing as how this case is still open, it is possible that the investigators are withholding key information, and maybe within our lifetime we might be able to find out what actually happened to Laureen. But until then, we can only honor her memory and share her story, so that we can spread awareness of hers and the countless number of other missing persons cases. The first post I wanted to take a look at was posted on the Let's Not Meet subreddit by a Redditor using a throwaway account on March 13th of 2023. Incurred the wrath of a neo-Nazi at a previous job. I worry that my actions may have caught up with me. Footage included. This is my first time posting here. I've always loved coming here to read wild stories, but unfortunately, I seem to have found myself in a situation where I now have something worth putting up. Background. Before I completed my college education, I worked at a local food service job at a major chain of supermarkets. It was a pretty shitty gig, but honestly, I got to be relatively lax about my duties in the winter, as this town was a heavy summer tourist town. I'm not snobbish about work, and I appreciate the locals most of the time as they're nice people, so I had a good time. That said, as anyone who has worked in retail or food service generally know, you are bound to have some problem customers. Usually it's someone who's impatient or perhaps someone who's unwilling to listen or demands that you check in the back. I'm fine with that. I give people the benefit of the doubt, but one day, in the winter around 6 or 7 in the evening on a closing shift, I had a run-in with someone who I couldn't give the benefit of the doubt. Cutting to the chase, here's what happened. A man in his late 40s to early 50s came up to me, wearing typical late fall garb. I asked him what sort of order he wanted. He replied, "Do you know where you're going to go when you die?" Naturally, I raised an eyebrow, but I figured he was one of these annoying evangelical types. I've dealt with them before. You usually just take the pamphlet, endorse some platitudes, and then tell the manager on duty they need to warn that person. So I just gave the canned answer and deflected the question. After some awkward discussion, he brought up the fact that I was wearing a pride pin. Our company gives these to us during Pride Month, and also brought up the fact that based on my name tag, my appearance, and a necklace that I had thought I had hidden under my apron, that I was Jewish. Naturally, he went on about how he didn't think this sat right with his worldview. I started to get irate, but again, this is not out of the ordinary. Usually these types would pray for me or feel bad for me. This is where the assumption fell flat. He, in a cruel way, said that thing that happened during World War II was actually a good thing, intended by God perhaps, and it was in fact an impotent solution if you talking to me is anything to go by. I started to see red and was a bit shocked. I told him to get away from the counter and that this conversation was over. He played dumb because people started to look over due to my raised voice. I'm an extremely meek person, and I don't really think anyone had ever seen me act anywhere near that level. "We were just talking," he said. He wouldn't budge. I went out around the counter into the store floor and pointed to the exit, insisting that he leave before I called the manager on duty. He didn't, and I ended up dialing the MOD on the department floor. He gave me a death glare before finally walking deeper into the store instead of the nearby exit. The MOD and one of the department leads came over to see what happened, and I explained the story, the man's appearance, etc. They found him and ushered him out. After giving HR a lengthy statement the next morning, they informed me that he was no longer allowed in the store again, or in any of the regional stores for that matter. To put this in perspective, at the time I was living in a very rural community. That is the only supermarket for miles. To go to another one of a different branding would be a 1.5 hour trip there, plus another 1.5 hour trip back. Effectively, he had been fucked over, though obviously not without good reason. I was pleased to see how my employer had defended me promptly, without using the customer is always right bullshit, to their credit. Not long after, I began seeing at least 2 distinct people walking through the department with hoodies that had 1488 and bedazzled on the right sleeve, with their hoods up, occasionally looking over my way. Sometimes they would even walk by multiple times in the same direction, and never with a cart. After a week or 2 of this happening, and the end of spring semester coming to a close, I turned in my 2 weeks notice early. In the intervening period between then and my return to college out of state, my home, well my parents' home, had gotten a mailbox smashed and mail torn. The neighbor's Ring camera caught it parked in front of their property while idling, and it was a large dark truck. Not very specific, but it had some bumper stickers with some very kind choice of words for certain minority groups. So you get the idea. The police noted it down, but they didn't have an idea what group could have done this. With some digging and talking to the people who had lived in the area far longer than my parents and I had, there was indeed a local group of neo-Nazis the town over, and were not very subtle about it considering their gatherings, their choice of fashion, and their bumper stickers. I went back to college. My parents reported not much further activity. I guessed it was because my car was gone, and because I no longer worked at the supermarket. I finished up school there and came back to a lucrative job offer in my field about 45 minutes away from my parents' place, and about 30 minutes away from that supermarket, in a bigger city as opposed to a rural area. In the next section of this post, the OP details an encounter that happened shortly after they came back into town, and also included videos of this event. A few nights ago, I was sitting at my desk in my apartment building, playing D&D online with some college friends who I kept in touch with. I've been in this apartment for a very short amount of time, but I love it, other than the fact that I have to face a huge parking structure. It's not a huge deal though, as by the time I go to bed, nobody really drives in and out, so no headlights blasting me in the face. Around midnight, I noticed out of the corner of my eye, a pickup truck, driving up to my level in the parking garage. I don't make much of it, but suddenly it diagonally parks across the path and faces me directly. There are very few apartments in my building, and I'm near the end, so it was unlikely that they were looking at someone above or below me. That being said, it's odd that they would have not been parked there, but paid admission just to drive up to my level and do this, and not go to the other person's floor. I ignore it, and go back to D&D, until I noticed that the pickup truck driver started flashing his high beams on and off rapidly in an unusual pattern. He keeps doing it, so I pull out my phone to record. He must have seen this, so he starts driving. He slows down and stops again, just sitting there. Here's the first video. After a while, he drove off. I was quite weirded out, but it's the city. Weird shit happens. Probably a mistaken identity or trolling or whatever. But after a few more seconds, I see the truck pull around on the next floor down and just stop in the middle of the path, completely still. Again, I wonder if he's looking at me or just another apartment near me. I try to check this by waving him on, basically mentioning to get the fuck out. He immediately reacts by driving forward and down to the next floor. So he was definitely looking at not only my apartment, but me directly. At this point, I'm concerned, because it's not hard to find out what number my apartment is based on where the windows are located on the outside of the building. Here's the second video. I really didn't want to think he would stop at the next floor down, but my curiosity was still high and I waited. Sure enough, he did. This time, he parked directly at the window so I could see him from the very steep angle downward. I just stared, but this time instead of flashing his lights, I saw the door open, and he stepped out gesturing a bit. I saw him start to reach for something, or fiddle with something on his person, so I stopped recording and got away from the window. He started yelling at the top of his lungs, though I couldn't understand what he was saying exactly due to the distance, the objects between us, and me focusing on turning off the lights and closing the blinds. I did so, and waited in my bedroom. Here's the third video. I waited in my room for about 10 to 15 minutes and peeked out the side of the other room's window. He was not at the same spot as before. I looked down at the street and saw that the truck had actually parked up the road from me, near the start of my street. For context, this is a one-way street. The parking garage opens up two ways. One, into my street but down the street from my apartment. You would have to go down the street and do a 5 to 10 minute circle around the district I'm in just to get to where he parked. The second way is on the other side, into a public square, and do a 10+ minute loop to get to the start of my street. Either way, he definitely knew what he was doing. And if I thought it was a prank or temporarily weird behavior at first, I didn't as of then. The truck was empty and he wasn't inside. Thankfully, my apartment has a locked front door, and my door has multiple locks and a deadbolt, plus a peephole that has a swinging cover. I waited, but nobody seemed to come up to my door as far as I could tell. About an hour after the truck had first parked there, it was gone. I have a meeting with my property manager tomorrow. I want to make sure that this problem is not a pre-existing one so I can rule it out. I'm easy to do a people search on due to my job and networking from it. In addition, my full name on my name tag was visible at the deli for multiple years. I worried that coming back to this area and getting a job / putting myself out there has brought back people from my past, specifically people who think I'm subhuman, and who I fucked over at that. I don't trust the cops on principle no matter where I live. They've been known in this area specifically to have some really nasty ties. I'll call them if it gets worse, yes. But for now, I'm not involving them or bringing them into my apartment. I hope this was appropriate for the sub. I'm so really creeped the fuck out. Thanks all. The commenters on this post expressed their concerns for the OP right away, and a Redditor by the name of Runner20MPH would also share their personal encounters with individuals like these. You don't want to hear this. It's best to take your parents and leave. As a Muslim American, my family has had this same experience in part of our state that harbored some hate groups. We were there for a year because the company my father worked for needed him there. Unlike you, I didn't do anything back. However, it didn't matter. We started hearing knocks on our door and windows at different times of the night. Anyways, my family is Afghan American, and once my uncles and cousins found out, they came over for a week. However, we made sure it was not obvious. Fortunately, my uncles and cousins are mad. They kept night watch while my family slept. My elder cousins would laugh a lot while planning out what they would do to the Nazis. They waited for the knocks. One night, right at that moment, these people started banging and knocking at the windows and doors. My whole family burst out with bats. They beat the hell out of these guys until the police came. We left shortly after that because we feared revenge. However, I'm quite happy that the Nazis got whacked. Other users would share their concerns for the OP as well. Jesus, that's horrifying. I hope you're doing okay now. Better now for sure. Been careful in terms of where I go and what time and with whom. But generally, I'm not trying to let it affect me beyond simply being vigilant. If I did, they've accomplished part of their goal, which is to induce paranoia. I can't have them having any sort of victory. You should have a male friend or security officer walk you to and from your car at all times. And definitely get some pepper spray. Or even a taser if your state allows them, so you can have something to defend yourself with if it comes to that. Never walk alone if possible. I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this. It sounds absolutely terrifying. Put your safety first at all times. Thankfully, I have a means to defend myself now. I'm also a male myself, and without giving away too much info, I generally consider myself an intimidating guy physically. Regarding of my actual disposition, going forward, I'm gonna continue surrounding myself with friends and coworkers when I can, and make sure I'm careful if for some reason I really must go out alone, or at a late/isolated hour. Thanks for the well wishes. If job prospects go well later this year, I'll likely be moving, so it won't be a forever problem. Unfortunately, due to this being posted onto a throwaway account, I wasn't able to find any updates, as it's likely that the OP stopped checking on the post soon after they uploaded it. We can only hope that they managed to get one of those job prospects they were talking about, and were able to get out of the situation unharmed. I have been checking on this post for a few months now to see if anything developed, but to my knowledge, there have been no updates. So, like many of the other posts on Reddit, we're left to speculate on what ultimately happened. Staying on the Let's Not Meet sub, I found this post uploaded by the user Pity42 on August 9th of 2023, where they detail a terrifying encounter with the man who showed up at the OP's home. I recorded the moment a guy came to my house with a gun. Video at end of post. I am in university right now, but staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends when we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age. We were talking and having fun, but it was nothing too serious. Or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers and we hung out a couple times, but he became incredibly clingy from the start, so I decided to distance myself in the hope that he would get the hint and back off. Well, he didn't. When I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind, it had been less than 2 weeks since we first met. I finally responded and told him that he needed to chill out. He appeared to calm down a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed, and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, etc. Just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to someone to say you barely know. I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a fling, but this only made him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, and calling me a slut. Basically a complete 180 from what he had been saying mere minutes ago. Then, all of a sudden, the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "Bitch, you better get ready, because I'm coming over for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was very frightening because he knew my parents were out of town for the week and that I was staying at their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was because I was always the one driving, and he didn't know my friend either. So I thought that he had no way of figuring it out, since again, I'm normally living at school in another state. Regardless, I locked all the doors and shut the blinds just in case. After a while, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked up at my phone and saw a notification on my lock screen. It was the Ring app, indicating that there had been movement on my parents' camera. It was him. If you watch the video, you can clearly see something in his hand. When he notices the camera, however, he left. I immediately blocked him on everything and reported the incident. I have no idea what he planned to do once he got here. It was terrifying to realize that he had come over while I was asleep and defenseless, and completely unaware of his presence. As I would later find out, he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently he Googled it, and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with my parents' address. Since I'm on my parents' phone plan, I guess it shows up that I still live here. This revelation was fucking horrifying, as I never knew my phone number could reveal my home address. I'm so extremely upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for anyone to find, as it is incredibly dangerous that websites would just give it away to anyone. Please learn from my mistakes, and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text or call people, and that number can't be tracked back to you so easily. My advice is that you use a disposable phone number for anyone that you're talking to that you meet informally or online. I still can't sleep at night. Hopefully this never happens to anyone else. Here's the link to the video of the guy. Despite the video being very short, we can clearly see the person who the OP is talking about. And if you pause it right here, we can see that something is in their hand, which appears to be a firearm. The fact that this person only knew the OP for a short amount of time, but was willing to go to these lengths is sickening. Unfortunately, like many of the stalking cases we've encountered, the police seem to be of little to no help for the OP. You reported this to the cops, right? Yes, but they were surprisingly dismissive. Our area has had a substantial uptick in crime lately. Lots of homeless camps around, so I guess this wasn't considered very high under priorities. They kind of made me feel like it was my fault, to be honest. Told me to make sure I lock my doors, change my phone number, and to call them back if he comes by again. Yeah. Oh man, I'm super sorry to hear that, but calling them was a smart thing to do. I'd go back during the day and see if there is someone else you can speak to about getting a proper report filed. Maybe even a restraining order. This guy is going to do this to other women if the cops don't put some serious pressure on him. A user by the name PeachCat22 would also share their friend's experience with another creepy stalker. My bestie got involved with a guy like that, and to this day, he still finds way to stalk her and let her know that he is watching her. She has a restraining order and everything. She's gone to court over it plenty of times, and she's not the only girl he's done this to. To this day, that POS still makes random accounts to try to follow me to find out more about her. Therefore, my advice is to inform all of your friends to be on the lookout for shady follow requests. Please avoid posting stories on social media. I know it sucks, but you might consider going dark on all socials altogether, or making social accounts that use an alias. It is way too easy to be stalked these days, and if he's already willing to escalate to a firearm, you have no clue what else he's capable of. I would also recommend getting a second Ring camera and hiding it, or car cameras. He could come back and try to dismantle the one he already knows about. And obviously change your phone number. Sadly, because you don't know if the story ends here, you may also want to consider how to protect yourself. I carry a taser. I've also been trained on how to use knives so that they don't get taken away from me. It's a good life skill to know self-defense, so maybe start watching videos or sign up for a class right away. Sorry if this happened to you. I hope for your sake that this is an isolated incident and that you are able to disengage from him easily. Another user by the name Elder Millennial would comment this. Okay, so it looks like he got out of the vehicle on the street with the lights on. After he saw the camera, he didn't walk back to that car. Did he go around the other side of the house trying to get in? I'm so glad you reported this to the police. That is something I've been wondering about as well. The camera only started recording when he arrived, so I can't say for sure he came out of that car. I know he doesn't own one, which would mean that a friend or relative had knowingly driven him to my house with a weapon. Fortunately, the OP has not posted about another encounter with this individual, and hopefully will never have to. I strongly encourage everyone to take the OP's advice and not give anybody that you don't trust your personal phone number, because with just that small piece of information, anybody could uncover a lot more information about you than they should. Our final story comes from the Creepy Encounters subreddit and was uploaded by the user Ali2 on May 7th of 2023. The first post is titled Balcony Visitor, and it reads like this. Hello. For context, I'm a woman living alone in my apartment that is located on the ground floor, and so my balcony is very visible for others to see. Every night, I go to work at 4 a.m., so I leave around 3:40. Unfortunately, in France, they decided to turn off the lights from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I think. But thankfully for me, the landlord where I live turned on the lights just for me from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. It's very dim, but I'm thankful for it still. This Thursday night, like always, I got in my car, locked it, turned on my lights, and something caught my eye, so I looked up. I thought that it was just a cat jumping from my balcony because they love to come by and look around and leave. But this was not a cat. It was a man standing next to my balcony. I think that my light surprised him, and I'm looking at him walk away from me in the grass, but he can't leave that way, so I'm just staring at him. Scared and calmly crying, not knowing what to do for like 10 seconds. But then I see movement again, and it's him walking towards me, looking at me quickly. And then he just continued walking to the main road like nothing happened. He takes one last look at me in my car before I lose sight of him. Also, he was wearing black sweatpants and a camo jacket. I don't know what he was doing here, if he was just sleeping on my plastic sofa on my balcony, or I don't know. But I can't stop thinking about his face looking at me, or what could have happened if it was pitch black outside. I wanted to make a report to the police, but they say they can't because there's no damage. The lady also told me, no, but maybe it wasn't for you. Maybe he was looking around for a dwelling. And I said, at this hour and this outfit, I don't think so. And then she replied, no, I'm talking robbery. Like no shit, Sherlock. Since then, every night I run like crazy to my car with pepper spray in my hand. Also, I bought a surveillance camera on my balcony just to check before going out at night because I'm super paranoid and I'm kind of developing OCD. I have to look and check outside before going to sleep. Dear random man, let's not meet again. Commenters were quick to give advice to the OP in case they ran into this person again. If you have close neighbors, get loud. Embarrassing and calling out criminals gets them to leave. Quickly. Worked when 2 guys busted in while I was home once. I screamed so loud and acted so crazy, they got scared of all 5 feet of me and left. It also helps your neighborhood so they can keep on the lookout. Staying silent puts you in danger in a situation like that. If I think somebody is in my house or following me, I turn into Medea on a real bad day. I have lots of neighbors in my apartment complex, but it's mostly old people, I think. I couldn't even do something because I was so shocked to see someone, but you're so right. Next time I'll make a huge scene, even if it is 3 a.m. Especially if it's 3 a.m. Wake everyone. They don't want you hurt, but they're asleep. Ask your apartment manager if there's an unused unit higher up in the same building. Living on the ground level is the most vulnerable, and moving from one unit to a higher unit is much less difficult than changing buildings altogether, which is worth considering as well. There is no higher unit available. The apartment complex is full at the moment. It's the first time I'm having this problem, so I'm really stuck and don't know what to do, but thank you for your help. Sorry to hear there's no higher up unit. If you know this only because there's a no vacancy sign up, tell the manager you want to move upstairs when there is a vacancy, and why. They need to know that there's a prowler anyways. Forgot to say, if your door to the patio is a sliding glass one, get a wooden dowel from the hardware store. Measure the inside track of your door first, then go down to the hardware store and have a dowel cut 2 inches shorter than that to lay down in that track. That way the door can be jimmied open more than a tiny bit, but it's not so tight that you can't easily drop a dowel in there. And if you have horizontal blinds, get curtains. If you forget to turn those blinds the right direction and they're not 100% flat to each other, a person can look down through them. And for about 3 whole months, we would not get an update from the OP until August 28th of 2023, around 2 weeks from the time of this original recording, when the OP would come back with an unsettling update. Hello, 3 months ago I wrote this post. Since then, for my own security and comfort, I've decided to buy a surveillance camera. The position is perfect and I can move the camera from my phone even if I'm not home. This is where it's getting even weirder. So the first time I saw someone was the 4th of May at 3:40 a.m. In June nothing happened, so I thought maybe it was a one-time thing, like wrong place, wrong time. 4th of July, I'm getting ready at around 3 a.m. and 20 minutes later, I see a notification from the camera on my phone. I didn't get nervous because sometimes my camera just captures bugs or spiders, but oh boy, my heart skipped a beat. I opened the notification and the video started. I saw a man walking straight next to my balcony and he's hiding his face. I froze for like 5 minutes and I decided to call the cops because I didn't know if he was still here because the camera didn't send any notifications after that. I noticed that sometimes my camera doesn't capture everything. The cops came and he wasn't here anymore. I was weirded out about the situation. 23rd of August. I left for work at 3:45 a.m. Yes, precisely. While I was driving, I get the notification at 3:47. It's again the same dude from July. He's still hiding his face, but I can't recognize his gait. I called the cops right away and we met at my place. I was crying and explained that this wasn't the first time it happened, that I didn't feel safe, and that I couldn't understand why this was happening. The male cops were minimizing the situation, and that got me so pissed because they could see that I was confused and scared, but they kept saying no need to worry. Maybe he's not here for you. I don't care. It's 3 a.m. and it's dark outside, and some random dude is close to my place. Anyways, they couldn't do anything because there was no damages. I decided to lay down a handrail, just in case, even though I know they can't do anything. I'm still nervous every night when I have to go to work. I got my pepper spray with me just in case. Also, I got great neighbors around me that kind of helped me in some ways. But I don't know why he's here, and why in the middle of the night. No idea. I'm sure I forgot some details, so feel free to ask questions. Thank you for reading. At this point, I did start to grow concerned for the OP. If this is a stalker, they could be familiar with the OP's work schedule and know when they're about to leave or have already left for work. The comments under this post went like this. Do you have a sliding glass door to get to your balcony? Put a piece of wood or a metal rod on the side of the door track when the door is shut. Type sliding glass door lock into Google and you'll see what I mean. I only say this because every balcony in apartments seem to have sliding glass doors. I do have one already. My neighbor gave me one. It's not a sliding one, it's a big window glass door kind of thing. Can you get a very bright motion detector light that shines on your balcony or front door whenever there's movement? Can you try to change your schedule? Your pattern unfortunately makes it easy for someone to plan something. If not permanently, can you change your schedule for even 2 weeks? That way he might think that you're no longer leaving at night. For the exterior glass door, they sell those sound alarms that wedge underneath the door. Even if there is no sound, the wedge is very, very effective and would give you time. Lastly, can you put a lock on your internal bedroom door? When my husband traveled for work, it was very obvious because his car would be gone. So he put a lock on the interior bedroom door and it gave me peace of mind. Because even if someone was able to breach the exterior door, I know they will be surprised and slowed down by the extra lock. Another important thing is blackout curtains. It makes it more difficult for someone to case the place and see what you're up to and when you're asleep. Lastly, can you consider a dog? A barking dog and bright motion lights are probably the biggest deterrents. A dog will also warn you by their behavior if there's someone outside. I'm going to copy and paste this for everyone that I'm answering to. It happened again today, 29th of August at 3:04 a.m. I'm tired. Yes, I could have another light other than the lamp that I have outside next to my balcony. I talked to my boss about it, and he said that I could come in later at like 6 a.m. And I don't know his pattern. The nights are so random I cannot know in advance when it'll come. Great suggestion for the lock and curtains. I'll look into it. And lastly, the dog. It's not the first time I heard that, but I don't feel confident enough to have one right now. And I don't want just a security dog, but also a company. It's so complicated. Thank you so much. A few days after this post, the OP would come back with one last and final update, but this time, they made sure to provide video from the security cameras. The commenters under this post seemed a bit more divided than in the other ones, but I'll read the post, play the videos, and then go over some of the comments and let you decide for yourself. First of all, thanks to everyone for all the recommendations and the sweet messages. I didn't expect that. So like I said to some comments that I answered to on the 23rd of August, it happened again on the 29th. With my neighbors, we talked about installing another camera in a hiding spot. Maybe that way I can record him without him hiding his face. Also, I live in France, so I don't think we have bear spray, but I'll ask for a stronger spray just in case. I think I also have a whistle somewhere in my house, so that's kind of an alarm, right? Here are the videos that I talked about. I hope it's working. So it happened 4 times now. The first time it happened, I didn't have a camera. Yet he was really next to my balcony on the right of the video. From my balcony, I have access to my balcony and bedroom. And every time he's there, I'm already awake so my lights are on. I think it was him the first time. And because I saw his face that time, I think now he's hiding it. And yes, I showed the videos to the police. Edit. The way he is headed on the side, I also have windows for my kitchen, so I feel like he's still close to me. Thank you again so much. The comments on this post went like this. He is 100% hiding his face from the camera. If he was just passing by, he wouldn't be bothered about anything being seen. I mean, if I was just walking by to cut through and get somewhere, I probably wouldn't have even noticed the camera, right? Or if he wasn't feeling guilty as well, it's really creepy. I'm just seeing a guy walking home every night from work, possibly taking a shortcut and then shielding his face from a super bright light as he passes your balcony. The shortcut is impossible, and also it's a private property, and he's coming from the main street. He doesn't live here, and he's not here every night, but he is always here when I have to go to work, not on the days when I'm not working. We don't have a layout of the property, so I'm unable to determine if this person is just a late night commuter taking a shortcut through their neighbor's yard. But according to the OP, this is a private property, and any neighbor should have no reason to be there at all. I will admit that at first I did assume that this person was inside of the neighbor's balcony, or at least a lot closer than the video shows. But after looking at the footage, I'm a little bit more unsure now. Regardless, I do think it's weird to be in someone's yard late at night, even if there is a shortcut. One commenter would say this: "He never seems to linger or appear even the slightest bit interested in your residence. This is not to downplay your situation. I had a similar terror in years past, which resulted in a near butt-naked meth head in my living room. And yeah, he gained entry through the slider. There was history of him knocking and tapping on doors and windows as well as peeping. Is this man on your property when he cuts through the grass? Or is he walking on a public sidewalk? If it's private property, then he could be in violation of trespass. But since you're in France, I don't know the laws. He doesn't seem to appear homeless or on any kind of mind or mood-altering substance. Are drugs an issue where you live? Are there homeless encampments nearby? Or perhaps just a small patch of wooded area? Even just a small stand of trees? What exactly is on the side of the house? If it's just the backyard, then yeah, I'd be on extra high alert. As for other places to check, does your landlord have any kind of basement or storage facility? Speaking from a different experience, I had tenants who conveniently didn't tell me about sounds under their house for fear of being evicted. They only told me, "Oh, yeah, so that's what it was." When I found a mattress and sleeping bag in my basement, the guy had dug under the foundation. Anyway, I shared this fun little anecdote just because the nooks and crannies are worth a look. Just bring a friend, a big friend, in the daytime. Also, in terms of catching his face, have you considered turning off the lights and using a night vision camera? I'm wondering if part of shielding his face is because it's bright and night blinding. Like how they show in movies or teach in self-defense classes. Shining a bright light directly at an attacker or perp renders them unable to fully see you. Funny enough, the timestamps of his activity are pretty consistent. 3:07 a.m., 3:47 a.m., and 3:04 a.m. Maybe you guys are just commuting buddies. But for real, better safe than sorry. I don't know if this is common where you are, but on the sides of some alleys and buildings in the States, homeowners use a blue light for the side of the house. Why, you ask? Yeah, I wondered the same with my buddy's side walkway in San Francisco. After asking what the creepy blue light was about, he seemed genuinely surprised that I'd never seen that before, to which my buddy chuckled and said, "Go look at your arm under the light. So can you see any veins?" Yeah, neither can the efforts who are leaving their needles where I walk. So yeah, maybe not relevant to the situation, but still a useful tidbit. As far as an extra hidden camera, you could try maybe a trail cam. It's meant to catch wildlife, but I don't see why I couldn't catch your balcony, bro. Might be cheaper than another camera like you have, or if at least be more easily hidden in bushes. Anyway, sorry for the long post with personal anecdotes and tidbits. It's just that I went through something similar-ish, in that it involved multiple police visits and cameras. No one was hurt when I was there at least, but there was reason to believe that he had maybe been involved in SA a year prior at the same property, and they couldn't arrest him because he only trespasses, and didn't intend to do anything further or greater harm. Which is why I was saying that even though he doesn't look sketchy per se, an overabundance of caution couldn't really hurt. As for my nighttime visitor, he left an indelible mark on my anxiety. It was an all-around bad time. I'm sure I have even more weird advice that I just couldn't think of at the moment, but ultimately, my unsolicited 2 cents is that from the second I was afraid to fall asleep in my own home, my home was no longer mine, in that it was no longer a place of solace, comfort, or refuge. I tried to stick it out, but ultimately moved. It still kind of feels like he won, but I'm not tied up in knots whether something scary, threatening, or violent will happen each and every night. The OP did reply to this comment. Yeah, he's still on my property, which is private originally. I never saw him around where I live in the daytime, and he's always coming back from the main street, so he doesn't live here, I'm pretty sure of that. I don't know what he's doing on the side of the residence, because I still have windows on the side and it's from my kitchen. And yes, he is really consistent about the hour, but never the day. Yes, the blue light is common here too, but only in the toilets of nightclubs. And they couldn't arrest him because he only trespasses and didn't show any intent to do greater harm? Yep, same. I feel pretty anxious because from my balcony, I can go to my bedroom also, not only my living room. I had a nightmare feeling like he was watching me sleep or waiting on the side for me. This was one of the last comments that the OP gave us on this situation, and with this post being so recent, we have no more information to go off of. But I will link the OP's profile in the description so that you can check out for any potential updates in the future yourself. After watching these videos myself, I will admit that I'm not fully convinced that this person is stalking the OP, but their behavior is weird. I think it could be possible that this is just another late night commuter, but regardless of any of that, it doesn't hurt to be overly cautious, because nowadays, you never know what somebody's intentions are, especially this late at night. I do really hope that for the OP's sake, this is just a misunderstanding. But until we get an update, all we can do is theorize. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments if you think this person was really stalking the OP, or if they're just walking through. Our first post was uploaded onto the RBI sub on July 20th of 2021, and it was titled, police didn't investigate, and it's been bothering me. At around 8:30 to 8:45, I arrived home from a quick trip to town to grab a beer. As I got out of my car, I could hear something. I thought for a moment that I had left the TV on and was hearing it from outside, but as I walked to the front of my car and pressed the lock button on my remote, I realized that what I was hearing was screaming. I listened for a second, thinking it was somebody screwing around, but then the woman's voice screamed, "No, stop, you're hurting me, you're killing me," and an adult male voice yelling something I couldn't make out. There was a dog barking from the same direction, as well as a repeated thudding noise. I immediately dialed 911 and told the police. They could even hear the screaming in the background. They said they'd send an officer to drive by, but an hour passed and none came. I watched for them on my security cameras. I pulled the footage from the only one that was set to record constantly. The camera on my back door only records when it detects a humanoid shape, so it caught me making the phone call and a little of the screaming in the background. The backyard camera caught it all, but it's unintelligible due to the outdoor AC unit noise. I cleaned up the audio as best I could, but I need advice on how to proceed. I'm attaching a Dropbox link to the video. I also included the original in the second half of the video. If you watch it, the screaming was coming from directly where the camera is pointed, but more than 50 feet away across a narrow field. There is a small shack that has a couple of cars usually parked at the road, just on the other side of the field. It is bothering me a lot since I'm 41 years old, and I've never heard anything so disturbing in real life. Here's the video. As stated in the post, the OP also provided this video. Now I will warn you that while it does not contain anything visually graphic, it does contain the audio of the woman screaming. And because of this, I understand that some viewers might find this disturbing, so I've provided a timestamp for you to skip ahead. Here's the video now.
Out at Rocky Fork Lake. I'm not real sure the address. I'm at my home.
For those of you that skipped ahead, the original video is pretty noisy, but in the background you can clearly hear the distressed screams of a woman. A small section of the video also includes where the OP is on the phone with 911. That's frustrating to think that the police won't even come to check it out. Maybe call and ask for a report/file number to see what they say. Do you know anyone who has a hobby drone? It might be worth checking it out from above, early in the morning or late in the evening. I have a $1,000 DJ-1 4K drone. I thought about it, but it's all buried in trees, so I don't know how good it would do. But it is worth a shot. I could always take it up 200 feet and then come down slowly if I don't see anybody about. I guess I should probably know the way of the land around here anyway. The OP would also give us an update the following day, after finishing speaking to the police about what he had heard the night before. I talked to them and they wrote down what I said. I showed them the video, they have copies of it, and said they would do a welfare check. They also told me to drop it and not trespass or I would be cited. They said they will handle anything, so I guess I'm just going to have to watch the newspapers and see if anything comes up. That's all I can do. I've done my due diligence, and I really hope everything is actually alright. It is weird that the police use the term drop it when telling the OP to stay away, but this is likely because they don't want anybody to go near the crime scene and potentially contaminate it, which could jeopardize any investigation going on. And after a whole year of waiting, the OP would come back to leave an update comment under the original post. September 7th. I guess they finally had a reason to go out and check the property I was trying to tell them to look at. There are sheriff cars all over the place, and cops in gloves walking in and out of this garage, and even one cop throwing up in the front yard. I have a picture, but I can't add it to an update. This comment was followed by a separate post not long after. Welp, murder it is. I posted last year about coming home and hearing a female voice screaming for her life. I posted a video with the audio of the scream and got plenty of comments. About 2 months later, the house that it was coming from had sheriff cars all around it. I found out that an elderly man had taken his own life and that his son was the only person home and the person who had reported that his father had shot himself. Fast forward to last week, I was sitting at home watching YouTube when I heard gunshots. I live in the country and that's common, so I didn't think anything of it. Turns out, it was the sound of that son taking his mother's life. He's trying to claim self-defense, but he's being charged with murder. I live next door and my security cameras caught the audio of the murder. It also captures the vehicle that the son made the getaway in. I've had detectives in and out gathering video footage for the past week. This is a family annihilator. They are now looking at him for the murder of his father as well. The case has been reopened, and if they had recognized that my calls and reports were actually real, 2 lives could have been saved. I'm going to link the story. Also, wouldn't Tim Johnson II be Tim Johnson Jr.? The OP also provided a link to this news article. A Highland County man is accused of shooting his mother to death in Paint Township. In a press release, Highland County Sheriff's Office said the police received a call from a man who claimed his mother shot herself on Saturday at around 8 p.m. When deputies arrived at the home on Hickory Trail, they discovered the body of 61-year-old Stephanie Cheney. Investigators said her son, 40-year-old Tim Johnson II, admitted to shooting his mother when he was questioned about the incident. Johnson is charged with murder. His preliminary hearing is scheduled for February 8th at 9:30 a.m. in the Hillsborough Municipal Court. This is where I began to investigate this incident a bit further myself. I found more articles talking about these events, and I noticed something that confused me a bit about the OP's original post. I couldn't find any information about Tim taking his father's life. In fact, I found an obituary stating that Stephanie was preceded in death by her first husband, Tim Johnson. This information was probably misconstrued among the local residents while everybody was waiting to try to figure out what was going on. The OP's original post was uploaded on the 20th of July of 2021. The footage of the screaming was recorded on July 2nd of 2021. Fast forward, the news articles state that the incident with Tim and his mother took place on January 29th of 2022 at around 8 p.m. I think that the OP stumbled upon something that was brewing up in Tim's household for quite some time, and had the police done more when the OP originally contacted them 7 months before Tim took his mother's life, this incident could have maybe been avoided. Tim was eventually sentenced 15 years to life in prison for this crime. I couldn't find any information about him getting the possibility of parole, but I really doubt that he's eligible. Hopefully Tim is never allowed to walk free again. And while we can't bring Stephanie back, hopefully his family can finally get some peace, knowing that Tim is behind bars. This next post was uploaded on February 26th of 2021 by the Reddit user Bjorn Secular, where they detail their disturbing experience dealing with a person that their husband used to work with. The post goes like this. A former coworker is using burner numbers to harass my husband and acting obsessive. I know this is long, but I really appreciate anyone who takes the time to read this. In late November of last year, my husband Paul was tasked with training a new hire named Frank, who was brought in from outside the company. Paul does not usually lead training. However, Frank's supervisor was overwhelmed during the last quarter. Frank worked at Paul's office for a little over a month. Frank seemed friendly at first, albeit an excessive texter. Even Paul's boss complained that they received social messages from Frank during non-work hours. Sometimes Frank's messages would be incoherent and needier if he didn't receive an immediate reply, followed by multiple question marks. My husband addressed this with Frank during his training, and for the most part, the messages became infrequent. But after Frank was placed at his branch, the messages subsided. In early January, Paul's boss asked if he could discuss a work matter with Frank because his director was on vacation. Later that day, Frank sent Paul a message that said, "Babe." Paul thought perhaps Frank had accidentally texted the wrong person, so Paul didn't respond. Frank sent more messages regarding work, and when Paul didn't immediately reply, Frank made an explicitly suggestive comment. Paul responded, "Stop making things weird," and Frank apologized, but then added, "You're hot though." My husband told him, "You need to stop. This is not a line I want to cross with you." Frank then said something along the lines of, he was available if Paul wanted him. Paul said, "I'm a happily married man," to which Frank replied, "That's what all men say." Paul again told Frank to stop. I had previously met Frank when I visited my husband's office. Paul had pictures of me on his desk. His sexual orientation and marital status were not ambiguous when Frank sent those messages. Paul told me what happened as soon as he arrived from work. He said that he would screenshot the message and report them to HR. However, Paul felt so uncomfortable with the messages that he deleted them. Paul assumed Frank was drunk, and once clear of mind, he would be embarrassed and forget that it happened. Over the next few days, Paul received between 2 to 3 messages daily from Frank that were about work. However, towards the end of the week, Frank became apologetic and told Paul that he had hoped they could still be friends. Paul has only briefly known this person, has never hung out with him outside of the office, nor has he engaged in social texts. Paul has also not answered any of Frank's messages since the first time he told him to stop. A couple of things occurred to me over the next week. A week after Frank was placed at his new branch, Paul received messages from an iCloud account. They said, "Hey sexy," and when Paul didn't reply, they were followed by question marks. Paul immediately blocked the account, assuming it was a scammer. In the last few months, Paul received frequent texts from unknown numbers with local area codes that addressed him by name. Paul thought they were all robo-scams. I realized that this started around the time that Frank began his training. When I visited my husband's office, Frank barely acknowledged me when we were introduced. That night I joked with my husband that during my visit, Frank was like a shadow and seemed to appear every time I turned around. After a week of unanswered texts, Frank again apologized and asked if Paul would call him. He had called Paul's office earlier to see if he was there. Subsequently, Paul contacted his assistant manager/coworkers and asked them not to share a schedule with anyone who calls. Frank messaged that he would stop texting and was sorry if he bothered Paul, but later in the night, Paul started to receive messages from an unknown number with a local area code. The first message said, "Hey, remember me? I *67 the number from my phone to see if it was a computer or an actual phone line, and when I called, it rang twice and then went to voicemail." The person never stated their name, and their texts were incoherent. The texter asked, "Are you trying to end my career?" They claimed to be a former employee and said that they had previously dated Paul. "We've been together for 2 decades, and I'm the only person Paul has ever dated." The messages continuously baited Paul to call the number and find out who was texting him. Finally, they said, "You used to be sweet." Paul didn't block the number immediately because he wanted to see if this person would incriminate themselves. Paul received over 20 messages throughout the night. He never responded to any of them, and the number is now blocked. He paid a small fee to look up the number and found that it belongs to Envoy. The person used the VoIP to text. For those of you that are unaware, VoIP stands for Voice over Internet Protocol. Its definition is a technology that allows you to make voice calls using broadband internet connections instead of a regular phone line. Basically, that means that instead of using a regular phone to contact the OP's husband, this texter is contacting Paul through a computer instead, likely as an effort to hide their personal phone number, as well as their identity. Paul tried to look up a VoIP registry online. Paul also reported the anonymous number to the Federal Trade Commission with the text logs. He took screenshots of all the undeleted messages between him and Frank and the anonymous number. Paul also called local law enforcement. He knew they wouldn't be able to do anything because no direct threat was made, and they told him to keep the number blocked. Paul also paid a service to retrieve the text he deleted that came directly from Frank's number, but it was unsuccessful. iCloud backup was not activated. The next week at work, one of Paul's assistant managers approached him. They follow Frank on Facebook and were alarmed by his post. The day after Paul received a text from an unknown number, Frank made similar posts online and added, "With me, you're either ride or die, or dead." Paul compiled all the information he had and shared it with his boss and company HR. Over the next few weeks, Paul continued to receive texts from Frank, sometimes once a week or once every other week. After a month-long investigation, HR touched base that their legal department had found several red flags. However, they can't disclose the info because of confidentiality, nor were they going to fire Frank. Paul has been away on business for the past 2 weeks and I've been home alone. Paul told me he received texts from Frank that asked how his business trip was going. Just to reiterate, Paul hasn't responded to Frank's messages since he told him to stop, which was over a month ago. Last night I saw I had several missed calls from Paul around midnight, and when I called him back, I could tell he was worried. Same as before, he had started to receive texts from a number with a local area code. They said, "I miss you. Why do you hate me?" The number called him consecutively for an hour. Paul had to put his phone into Do Not Disturb. The following text messages he received were very explicit, and some referenced me. For the most part, I feel safe at home. We have a PO box and an unlisted street address. There are exterior and interior cameras at all entry points around our home. Also, our neighborhood has 24-hour security. However, I am worried sick every time Paul leaves the house. We've wanted to start a family for a long time, but have struggled with infertility. Unfortunately, this past month, I suffered another miscarriage. This person has added unnecessary stress to our lives. Last night I was shaking and couldn't sleep. Any advice on how to handle where the texts are coming from, or how to handle harassment would be much appreciated. Paul and I already discussed going to the police once he returns. A lot of commenters expressed their concern for the OP, and one user on a now deleted account would comment this. "This won't help with tracking the number down, but I suggest putting everything together in an email to HR and sending a copy to yourself so that you have a record. I would start it out with, as I reported to you on, and the date. I would also have a paper trail in case the company decides to turn on the wrong person. He needs to leave and needs to fight for unemployment, or you someday need to take legal action. That sounds extremely disturbing. I hope that someone is able to help you catch this guy." Another user by the name Perky Hedgewig would also comment, and even got a response back from the OP. It sounds like Paul and his boss need to go back to HR and let them know their lack of action is unacceptable and is creating a toxic work environment. This is beyond just being not okay. He has been forwarding every message to HR, but has not heard back from them in over 2 weeks. To his knowledge, he does not think the company has addressed the situation with Frank after the first complaint was filed. Later on, the OP did come back to the post with an edit on how the situation was developing with the HR department. Edit, more info. We were definitely frustrated with HR's response. My husband was told legal would review all of the information he shared. He spoke to them on the phone several times, hour-long conversations. They asked if he felt safe and he said frankly no. Things escalated in such a short period. They took certain precautions, i.e., he's never in the building alone, he didn't work past sunset, he parked towards the front, and security made sure cameras are facing the parking lot. They seemed supportive at first. However, the investigation took over a month and they told my husband there wasn't enough to fire Frank. The HR rep did say that she was surprised by legal resources. She didn't realize how much they have access to, and that they found several red flags, but they were unable to share what they found, or when/if Frank would be disciplined. Everything was treated like it was supposed to go back to normal, even though it doesn't seem like it was discussed with Frank, nor did it stop. Reddit user Lily Marlene would offer this advice to the OP. Beyond getting HR to get their shit together, a restraining order might be a good idea. It might be a good idea to make a post in the legal advice subreddit too, for more detail on what sort of action can be taken, since this is outright SA and borderline stalking. Weirdly, my partner is also named Paul, and we've had a similar problem in the past, so reading parts of this was a little surreal. I hope things get better for you both soon. Our OP would post an update 20 minutes after their first post and provided more information on the situation. Thank you to everyone who took time to read my original post and offer suggestions and support. I've received a lot of helpful advice, and I'm so appreciative. There were a few details I left out because of the length, but I tried to answer them in the comments. My husband is still away on his business trip, but will be returning home tonight. Paul does plan to get a new phone number once he returns home. We discussed filing an order of protection. One source of comfort is that we have a PO box, and our street address is not available online. With a restraining order, we would have to disclose our address. We're weighing the pros and cons. My husband and I spoke this morning, and he filled me in on a few new details. His boss called him last night after he sent her screenshots of the text from the VOIP. They have a great working relationship, and she disclosed a few things that she wasn't necessarily supposed to share. Legal was not able to link the VOIP text and calls back to Frank. There have been 2 separate numbers that have been used to harass my husband. Paul used Spokeo to look up the information, and both numbers are owned by the company Envoy. My husband's boss suggested that the next time he receives a phone call from the VOIP number, to answer and to record the conversation. I don't know if he should do that. If anyone knows how to search VOIP numbers so we can connect him to Frank, that would be a huge help. After Frank was placed at his new office last September, he has repeatedly asked to transfer back to my husband's branch. Paul is well regarded within his company and next in line for a promotion. During Frank's training, he would often make comments about how alike they were. Paul thought Frank was referring to their similar background in business. However, I searched online, and Frank may have lied about some of his previous work experience. Physically, personality-wise, and familial background, they are very different. I don't think the harassment is just based on attraction. There have been several messages where Frank calls my husband his friend and mentor, which is bizarre because they only worked together for 5 weeks. There were a few comments about Paul deleting the initial text from Frank. I was also frustrated by his decision, but I understand why. Paul had a rough childhood, and his first instinct is to avoid conflict. The text made him feel so uncomfortable and he didn't want to open his messages and see them. He had hoped that he would forget about what happened. However, the situation escalated. To be clear, those were the only inappropriate texts sent directly from Frank's number. His subsequent messages say things like, "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Hey, how's it going?" The texts from the VOIP are explicit. There are similarities in verbiage and format from Frank's texts, Facebook posts, and the VOIP texts. I did do some research on Frank. I searched our state's court dockets and found that he was arrested for DUI a month before he started working for the company. Paul's boss had previously complained that Frank was repeatedly messaging her about when his background check would be completed when he was hired. She thought it was suspicious, but nothing was flagged. At one point during training, Frank texted a coworker from a random number. The coworker asked if it was an alternative contact, and Frank explained that it was his smartwatch. When everything happened, I tried to find as much info as possible. When I googled his primary number, nothing came up. However, the coworker shared the smartwatch number, which is listed online as Frank's primary contact for the past 2 decades. It also shows several numbers attached to Frank's name, and it's noted next to one of them that it is a VOIP. There were previous addresses linked to Frank's phone number. According to one address, a Frank L. Smith and a Frank L. Miller lived at the same residence with the same people. I looked up both of those names, and they have different birth dates within a few years of each other. I was curious because Frank had told my husband that he was divorced, and I thought perhaps he had changed his last name. Frank L. Smith had the same birth date as the court docket I found. The biggest thing my husband's boss told him was that Frank recently asked for an out-of-state transfer, which is currently being processed but not certain. Paul has mixed feelings about this. He first felt relieved, but then frustrated that the company's approach was to make Frank someone else's problem, and it doesn't guarantee that it will stop. After reading this post, I went to the OP's profile to see if there were any more updates, and the very last thing I was able to find that was connected to this situation was this common thread between the OP and a user by the name Hyperdream. It looks like Envoy was merged with IntelliQuint a few years back. It may be a long shot, but they do have a complaint form here for unwanted calls and texts. Thank you. This was extremely helpful. I reported the texts, but my husband also plans to call their customer number to see if he can find out more information. It's been over 3 years since the OP made their original post, and I haven't been able to find anything else about their creepy coworker. So hopefully with the advice of Hyperdream, the OP's husband was finally able to block the VoIP numbers and end the harassment. I really hope that Frank stopped this behavior completely, not just for the OP's husband, especially if the company moved him to another city where he could potentially find another victim to harass. And seeing how the OP hasn't given an update about Frank, I think it's safe to say that the nightmare is over, at least for now. This post was uploaded onto the RBI sub on November 10th of 2019. Someone left a scathing handwritten note in my mailbox on Friday night. They brought in my dog who died from cancer, attempted to make me paranoid about the brake pads on my motorcycle, and insulted my family. I have security footage for the police, but I need more. Any additional info will help. In the post, the OP provided this video. Followed by a picture of this envelope. And lastly, a picture of the letter. I'm going to skip over some of the things in this letter because honestly they're pretty racist and gross, but it goes like this. How are you? Haven't seen you in ages. What happened to that gray furry dog you had a few years ago? I see you have a new bike. What type of brake pads do you have on it? Tell your bludgeon grandparents I said hi, would ya? I don't know how you still live at home with such dishonorable grandparents, but props to you, mate. I can visibly see the regret and anger as it burns you on the inside, but you managed to keep it all bottled up within yourself. Your boyfriend has given me the rundown on the heart-wrenching story of you and your struggles with your family, down to the nitty-gritty details. I know you must pray every night, but how do you manage to, when your heart is not pure? Just know one thing, the truth will always hurt, so maybe just go on living your lie, and maybe make your Insta private. You don't want people to know that your clothes, bike, food, and house are taxpayer funded. Just remember that the next time you take a bite of food. That's gotta hurt your manhood, don't it? I guess that's the price to pay for being a thief. How can you claim to be an animal rights activist when you suckle on the taxpayers' teat, taking from the mouths of more deserved humans? I hope life gets better for you. Let me know if you need a hand getting out of your situation. See you at uni, Mr. Big Forehead Smelly Pants. In the comments, the OP gave us more information about what they were experiencing. Hey everyone, first and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who has taken the time to read, watch, and respond to this post. It's heartwarming to see so much support from strangers. As I write this in Sydney, it's 1:30 a.m., and I just got home from the gym. I was planning to reply to everybody in the morning, but that would be unfair because you've all taken the time to help me out. I'll use this space to answer as many common questions as possible, and then reply individually to any outlying questions in the morning when I have more time. I'm from Sydney, Australia. Both my parents are in their late 50s, and not in perfect health. My dad has a lower back injury and hasn't been in the workforce for over 25 years. Mom has always been a stay-at-home mom. Needless to say, they're not in perfect health, and that's why I'm taking this seriously. If it was directed at only me, I could brush it off. but when it indirectly threatens my family, it makes me extremely furious. I have no idea who this person is. My suspicions are that it's a neighbor. My dad received a similar-ish letter about 1.5 years ago, and I'll be getting a copy and comparing the handwriting. The other letter from early last year is 100% from someone on our street. I'm not sure what neighbor it could be, and so I haven't taken the time to speak to any neighbors that I'm not on good terms with. The house directly opposite mine does have security cameras, but doesn't provide any angle which could help us. One thing I noticed is that although it was dark, there were no flashes or lights or any indication of a car waiting or stopping, leading me to believe they traveled on foot. I'm 21 years old and don't have any enemies that I know of. My guess could be that someone is targeting my family based on cultural and/or economic reasons. How they got access to view my Instagram or Facebook, I don't know. My Instagram tag is on my Facebook account, so I'm assuming they have my name. They would have access to my public Instagram. I won't be making it private because the letter alluded to that, and I don't want them to have the satisfaction of thinking I trembled. I also noticed that he's wearing a reflective logo on his shorts. I tried to pause to a frame, but I vaguely see a check, so I'm guessing that it's Nike. The letter was in an envelope signed by a close female friend of mine, so I curiously opened it. Don't think we'd have the possibility of finding fingerprints anymore. The letter alludes to me being unemployed, which is not the case. I study full-time and work part-time. Once again, I can't thank you all enough for your help. It's been invaluable. I read every comment left and I'll be responding to each of you as soon as I can. Peace. A Redditor by the name Death by Ooga Booga would comment this. Those shorts look like Hurley board shorts. Not sure if that's as common a brand in Australia as it is here. The logo is sometimes in the middle of the left leg like that. They're really skinny, white, your age or maybe a little younger. No facial hair, left-handed, and based on where their body comes up on the boot of your car, probably over 6 feet tall. If I had to guess, they legitimately know the person they signed the letter as. That's too personal. So be sure to ask her about it if you trust her. Good luck. Further down, the OP would give us this update. I spoke to a friend's dad who is a police officer. He told me that if I go to the police with little to no leads of who did this, it would be a complaint that would be easily dismissed. He insisted I try my best to find as much information about this guy as I can before speaking to the police to file a report. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions you guys might have. If you suggest that I post this on another subreddit, I'm more than willing to do that. Alternatively, feel free to cross-post if you'd like. I'm using an old account for my safety as the man in the video has attacked my Instagram and Facebook accounts. If you somehow know my main Reddit account, I urge you to please keep it confidential for the safety of my family, my doggo, and myself, as there may be some more information on there that they could use to threaten me. If there's enough interest, or if it's necessary, I'm willing to post a handwritten letter after I've spoken to the police about the best course of action. Thank you to everyone. Obviously, this update was posted before the OP uploaded the picture of the letter, which we have already read for ourselves. Thankfully, the OP left more updates in the comments. This is one of them. Another mini update before I head back to work. I spoke to the police. They weren't much help, as many of you anticipated. They just made an incident report and told us that if anything threatening occurs, to call 000. They refused to give us a copy of the original complaint as it is now an official police document. They referenced some coarse language used. Therefore, no handwriting can be compared, as it would be speculation to assume both incidents are related to each other. As for the boyfriend, I'm a straight male, so I can only assume that the reason for that being written is to insult me childishly. I've been at work most of the day, so I haven't had time to measure the postbox. I've looked around the neighborhood and found another home with security cameras and will be approaching them tonight. If you have any direct questions, please leave them under this post so I can answer them directly. I'm not sure what my next course of action should be. I doubt this guy is harmful, and I'm certain that he's doing it simply to incite a negative emotion in me. Hopefully I can get more footage, and we can work together to figure out his motives and where he came from. It'll be some fun. Thank you all once again. Back to work, but I should be able to respond in a few hours. In response to this, a user by the name Surely You Know gave their analysis on the situation. Couple of thoughts here. First, as we already know, this guy is disguising himself as a girl, both with the name and gender stereotypical girly type exclamation points. This person doesn't want you to know that he is a male and taking special care to act like he knows you by naming off a bunch of random stuff he could have just learned off of your social media accounts. You said that you were a straight male, so the writer is attempting to imply that you're gay as an insult. Now, what would motivate a guy you don't know to make himself feel like he is more masculine/manly by implying that you're gay? Here's my theory. This person is petty, insecure, passive-aggressive, feels emasculated, and upset with you but doesn't have the balls to confront you. I think this person is pulling info from social media and from someone that connects you to him, a female, likely a female friend of the name he signed on the envelope and letter. I think the letter writer is immature for his age, socially awkward, not in college, and probably doesn't know you and your family in any real way. They're going very far out of their way to make you feel like they know all this stuff about you and your family members. And I think the things they know the least about you, they're likely to put more emphasis on, because their intent is to convince you that they really do know these personal details about you. Why would someone who is vaguely threatening you want to out themselves by leaving so many clues, so you could figure out who they are? No way. They are trying to scare you, but they are vague and emasculated, unconfident and scared. So they are trying to throw you off. Assume that what is true is the opposite of what they are trying to convince you of. I think this is a male who is, was, or wants to be romantically involved with a female friend of yours. There is something this person is jealous about, hence their focus on trying to reduce you and make you feel less than. Their internal motivation would be driven by jealousy, envy, and anger about something you have that they don't. A close female friend that they think you're blocking their chances with? This person likely has some tendencies of stalking and obsessing about females who give them the slightest bit of attention. He becomes infatuated and wants what he cannot have. He is unlikely violent at this point. He is too scared to threaten you or say anything that could get him in major trouble. Try to think of a female friend that you have that is super nice and easygoing. She may or may not have noticed a male in her life that she considers totally in the friend zone, that is a bit too attentive, eager to please and hang out, wanting more of her time, and dejected when she is busy. It may be someone like a female friend or ex of yours, one that talks about you in passing, or just that you come up a lot in conversations because you're close. Sorry for the length. Just think of motivation to do this. What type of guy does this? What is his goal? Why would any male be jealous or irritated with you? And why are they listing so many personal details to try to convince you that they are close to you? Probably because they aren't. And either they want to be close to you, or they're jealous of you, because you hold or have something that they want, cannot have not been able to attain, or don't know how to. That's something that they get butthurt about, in my opinion, is likely to be a platonic friend, girlfriend, ex, or crush. After reading this analysis, I actually have to agree. In my experience, people who say racist things and attempt to use the word gay as an insult are typically very insecure, and that same insecurity forces them to act out, desperately trying to feel better about themselves. But thankfully, it looks like our OP is not insecure. Any updates, OP? Hey, I appreciate your ongoing support. We've given up on spending any further time on this. As much as we'd like to find out who wrote this, it just wouldn't be worth it. I'm suspecting it was the neighbor down the street. Nothing has happened since then, but if it does, I'll be sure to let the family at RBI know. And that was that. While the story might not be completely resolved, at least the OP has moved on, and nothing else has happened to them or their family. I want to give a special shout out to our Cold Crew members. You can become one too by clicking the first link in the description. If you made it this far, leave a like, and as always, thanks for watching.